Welcome to the Nehemiah Entrepreneurship Community Podcast. I'm your host, Patrice Sagay. I'm here today with two new friends, actually, from Family Bridges. We have with us Bethany Verrett. Did I say that right, Bethany?
Yes.
And then we have also with us Dr. Alicia La Hoz. Did I say it right?
Yeah, La Hoz.
Mm-hmm. Oh, La Hoz. Oh, excellent. Well, thank you so much. Welcome to the podcast. Now, we were introduced by mutual good friends, Jeff Grubbs, from the Murdoch Trust. By the way, how do you guys know Jeff?
I met him at a conference, at a philanthropy roundtable conference.
Yeah. Awesome. So Jeff wanted us to connect and see ways that we might be able to collaborate. Particularly, you guys were looking at enhancing your economic engine, your sustainability model. And he wanted to share kind of what we do and how we do it and so forth. And I just thought what you guys were so interesting that I wanted to share with our audience. Particularly because we have a Spanish initiative that we just launched. We've done work in Mexico for several years, but we've never been very intentional with working in the United States Hispanic market. And so we began that initiative, I think it was last year. And so we thought, you know what? It'd be good to have Family Bridges on so that we can share additional resources that may be available for the Hispanic community. But let me clarify, though, Dr. Alicia,
yeah,
you're not limited to the Hispanic community, do you? Are you?
That's right. We think about serving the whole family, and as we serve the whole family, that includes people in different generations that are here in the United States.
Okay.
And so when we think of younger adults, which I'm sure we'll talk to later, they tend to be more diverse. And so particularly when we're working with younger generations, the group and the audience is broader than just Hispanics or Latino.
Okay. So even though Hispanic Latino might be a market segment, but you go beyond that as well.
That's right.
Reality. So that's your entry point, but that doesn't limit your scope.
Got it.
Awesome. I want to make that clear. So let's talk about Family Bridges. So first of all, looking at your website, reading your story, you seem so young to have done so much. So let's first, what is Family Bridges for our audience?
Yeah, well, we strengthen families, and I'm not that young, but we strengthen families for purpose-driven children so that they could be leaders of their generation. And I'm a clinical psychologist by training. And in my clinical work, I did everything from foster kids, working with juveniles, working with couples, young adults, domestic violence. And across the border, there was always relationship chaos. So you have a 7-year-old crying in my office because he thought he was responsible for his father walking away, meet with the dad. There's really nothing that would be awful like a domestic violence situation. It was mostly that he just kind of let things held. And one day he just kind of exploded and things got really messy. So the son thought that the last argument they had was the reason why his father had walked away. And it didn't have anything to do with that. It had to do with mom and dad and the communication situation. So that kind of a thing, 40 hours of it, right? A week and plus, just listening to so much relationship pain. That I was just coaching clients, particularly working with Latino and minority groups. There's just a huge number of stigma that would make it incredibly hard for people to get that kind of care. Insurance, language. It's just, who's going to take care of my kids? Money. It goes on and on. And so we thought, if we could put people in a workshop setting and get behind it and do some prevention and do some coaching, we could probably move forward and help a lot of people. And what if we get really behind it and we start working with younger generations so that they know how to avoid falling in love with a jerk or kid, right? And making these relationship decisions that are so painful. Or how can we get behind a couple that's just considering marriage to help them understand what marriage looks like? Or a couple who is married or a parent who may be single and is considering entering into a relationship. What is a healthy attachment? What is domestic violence? How to pull away from those toxic relationships. And so we built this model, which was started with a consortium of different organizations under Nehemiah Clinics, which is a mental health organization across the United States. They've got really wonderful, robust programs. And we started there, and the president just really encouraged me to develop this Family Bridges program and model, which eventually became its own non-for-profit as we grew. But we partnered with several different partners across, starting in Chicagoland district, and we worked with amazing providers that represented the church community, the business community, the non-for-profit community. And we said, how can we work around empowering, equipping, uplifting our families around marriage and family? And so Family Bridges really was developed and forged in that community, that sense of community, working with different affiliates across the city, where we started with this relationship education university, if you will, and we became the backbone with all these organizations providing training, providing outcomes, and unleashing and empowering each of them to deliver relationship education in their communities. That meant we were in jails, we were in hospitals, we were in libraries. So we were where people were at, delivering couples communication, parenting, finance classes, just how to live these life skills that we thought would ultimately prevent trauma. Wow. And that's how Family Bridges was born. And to this day, we do that a little bit different, more in depth. But we started with high schools, couples, and adults, and then it just kept going. And now we have programs starting at age 4. We have face-to-face workshops that are 8 hours at length, but we also have a lot of enriching events that are just 2 hours, 1 hour, 3 hours, that kind of thing.
And now you do that full time?
Now I do that full time. I haven't done traditional clinical work in a few years.
Wow.
Had to decide. Can't do both. Love the clinical work, but this prevention work is so important, and the outcomes that we're seeing. Instead of serving 40 clients a week, I'm able to work together with this consortium, and we're able to serve thousands.
Wow.
In that face-to-face context, and millions worldwide with our media message.
So in a sense, Alicia, you went from being a clinical, what do we call it, the clinical therapist, to being a social entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Right, because you went from being guaranteed paycheck, working for it, to now kind of being on your own fully. We serve entrepreneurs here. Was that a scary transition for you?
That's a good question. I think because I grew up in the faith community with my parents were pastors, and they were called. In fact, we're here in the United States and came to Florida from the Dominican Republic because they were called by the mission field. I don't know. We grew up in a home that there was no food one day, and somebody knocked on the door and brought table food, and we're sitting there praying for the food that we were about to eat. There was no food in the cupboards, and somebody came with groceries, like that kind of thing. I don't know, that kind of does something to the imprint of who you are as an individual. So, fast forward years later, I had to make a decision. I got lots of interesting invitations throughout the years to take amazing job opportunities, right, in the cusp of our growth of Family Bridges. But once you're called to something, I think maybe that faith component just kicked in. And so that piece of this, I think, has always given me that sense of security and passion. There's always, of course, a component of it that you kind of get, there's a moment, right, that you have to deal with the scariness of it. I guess my faith has helped me power through that. And then once I work through that, then I'm just fine. So I think just recognizing whatever fears you have, putting them on the table and having that moment and giving yourself that space is always important. But I guess having the reminder of going back to my parents, to my own experiences, probably served as an anchor to be able to move forward.
So so walking with your parents, seeing faith actualized, gave you the fortitude and confidence to say, if it could happen with my parents, it could happen here, right?
You just have that in your DNA, I think.
That's awesome. Now, did you, thank you, Irene, for being with us. Irene said the future is female. Irene loves the fact we are only nothing but women in the studio today. And she said that's how we do it. We kick fear out with faith. Amen.
Amen.
So did you ever imagine that you one day will be leading your own organization?
No, I always had the calling. One of the reasons I went into clinical psychology was because people would knock at my parents' home at 11 p.m. and it was a domestic violence situation, So I grew up seeing all sorts of things in my house, and we grew up in a family where there were always people in my house. It was just very lively, missionaries, just people, and I was just concerned as I grew up, grew up in that where there were like 6 people who were going to plant a church, and that meant that all 6 sisters were going to do something. So for the members, right at the beginning, kind of a deal. So, growing up in that context, I just realized how much need there was. And so I wanted to go into psychology or the social world to be able to help the church. I knew that, and I had a very strong calling from earlier on. So as I did my clinical work, I would learn something and I'd go back to the church and put a seminar on it. I didn't go and wait to get the, all the degrees and licensing. I would be like, this is awesome. We need this. Let's go and take it back. So just because of the need there was. So I did know that. I never knew that I would be where I am right now.
Wow. An entrepreneur. So, and we're going to get into what you do and how you do it and some of the specifics. But then you have this young lady with you.
Yes.
Now how many team members do you have, first of all, Alicia?
We're right now 14. 14 direct staff, but we have affiliates and, hundreds of volunteers.
Okay. All right. So she's one of 14 or more people that works with you or for you in some cases. So Bethany, when did you join the organization? What led you to join this organization?
So I joined in September officially. The interview process started a few months prior to that, and I was looking for work that I thought would be fulfilling with the big move that my husband and I were about to make. He had an opportunity to pursue something in the Pacific Northwest, so I was looking for something in my skill set in that general area, and it's very difficult because I was on the other side of the country to especially during COVID, to find work.
Oops.
Oh.
And I was trying to find work in something that I at least, and on the other side of the country, and put in for this job because I really liked what they had to say, and I had gone to their website and I liked what they were doing, and I liked that they were saying, like, this is going to be a new project. It's something different from what we typically do, but we're excited about it. And I liked that, and I resonated with that. So I put in for it. Now, I almost didn't expect to get any interview with them because everything was, family bridges, lazos de familia, and I'm not great in Spanish. And I was like, oh, probably not going to get this job. Then I got the interview, and I was so excited about it.
Do you speak Spanish at all?
I can count to 10, and I can probably order something off a menu.
So do you have any Hispanic background in your family or in any of your community at all?
The community that we actually are currently living in Vancouver is actually there's a high Hispanic population where we are here, but it's not really in my background. I actually took many, many years of French.
Wow. And I speak French. So, and then there's a Latin combination there. So, so why her? She doesn't speak Spanish. She has no Latino background. What was it about Bethany that said, this is the one?
Yeah, well, Bethany right away has a heart and a passion and that mission mindset. And so there was great alignment with who we are. And that's really important, just alignment with our purpose and our vision, and just have that component. But, throughout the history of Family Bridges, one of the things that we've learned is to be culturally attuned to the needs of the community. So we empowered all of these affiliates to deliver content in their communities. We were one of 8 organizations with the Administration of Children and Families that received 3 cycles of federal funding for healthy marriage and family to the tune of $30 million when we started our program. And we did about 14 million of shared services. So that means that we shared those programs with different organizations. That taught us early on that as we work with different partners, we had great content in terms of how to be a good parent, right? And you have that content. The adaptation of that content in the jails was made more real by people from the community. The adaptation of that content in the high school setting was made more relevant by a young generation person that was part of that community and could really speak and translate the concepts culturally to that audience. So it wasn't just a translation of language, but it was also of culture. And we noticed that pretty quickly. One of the reasons that brought us to Portland is as we discovered and we strengthened our array of content. There was a deficit in the young adult age. So we're working with families and marriages, and for us with the Latino community, working with marriages means you have to work with the 4-year-old as well as with the grandmother. It's like the whole thing, you get the whole enchilada. It's not just the couple. So we're really looking at it systemically and looking at it community based. So we're having programs for all of that, but not for this critical age. And as we looked at the marketplace, we've always looked at the marketplace for existing content, existing research, or biblically based content, depending on our target audience. We just were not really satisfied with what was out there. It was outdated or missing, or just not really speaking into the current needs of the generation. And so when we're looking at this age group and we want to serve, we started understanding what is the makeup of this audience. Well, now it's not just a Latino-based audience. We're looking at, who is the 18 to 24-year-old. Culturally, some of them can come from the Latino family. Some can come from the African. What we learned about this audience is that they're a very diverse audience. And so when we start looking at who this audience is, it opens us up beyond a Spanish-speaking individual. A lot of them, sure, come as a first-generation individual, but overwhelmingly, many are bicultural brokers in their families, if they are from the Latino community, and there's just more diversity. So we kind of have to cross over and become even more diverse in our thinking if we want to serve this generation.
Wow. And I'm imagining, as you're sharing them, thinking some of them can relate more to Bethany than they can relate to some traditional Latino people.
Right. And our model is our staff are looking at more developing the infrastructure, the framework. We're doing a lot of the operations, but our model is empowering local communities and leaders to deliver content. And
her job is to then work. So with that, Bethany, so what is your job?
My job is to promote the Everyday Owl in the greater PDX community, greater Metro Portland area, hopefully one day expanding that out. But right now it's being great. It is partnering with other nonprofits. It is partnering with agencies that might be interested in this kind of content. It's partnering with individuals that are interested in it to say, hey, that 18 to 24-year-old group, they're diverse, they're excited, they have a lot of potential, and they just need to be equipped to go out there and do what they want to do. And this is such a community-centered area that having boots on the ground in the community is, I would say, vital to helping people connect with that. Not just because the content's online, anyone can access it.
Oh, she's having.
But what makes you connect with it? We're not just online. We are here doing something with that nonprofit you already know and you already love.
Wow, I love it. And so far, how are you enjoying that?
Oh, I love it. It's been great. I have met so many really neat people out here, and this area is just gorgeous as well. So that helps a lot.
Well, welcome to the Pacific Northwest. I owe you dinner, don't I? My wife and I are supposed to connect with you and your husband.
I think we talked about that.
Yeah, we'll make it work. So
we're going into phase 2.
What does that mean?
So indoor dining may be
that's right. Indoor dining would be that was soon. So Alicia, let's kind of talk a bit. You mentioned trauma, your background, kind of what led you to start this thing. And oftentimes when we think about trauma and the experience you share with that young person, we think it only happens to economically children and families from lesser economic means. And then the other issue, so that's one issue, when it really happens to more of us than we realize. The other issue is when it comes to minority communities, African Americans for sure, I'm sure Latino, it's a taboo, the idea of therapy and so forth, something that particularly Christian ones, right? It's something that you can just pray it away. So talk a bit about that and the challenge that you've had. By the way, talking to Alicia and Bethany from Family Bridges, we're talking about this organization that serves families from, I guess, young child all the way to grandparenting. in various communities around the nation in the area of helping families and children become whole and healthy. So let's talk about that. So how tough has that been, trying to address this area in the community that oftentimes is in denial?
Such a good question. So let's think about what trauma is, just for starters. So trauma is an event, it's an experience, and it's the interpretation of that experience that we have. So not everybody will experience a significant event as a traumatic experience. COVID-19 could be a trauma experience for some individuals, and for others, they thrive in it. They're pushing forward and they don't experience it as a trauma event. There are conditions that make it more difficult for some individuals to go through an experience and push forth. Things such as poverty, lack of resources, lack of community support, isolation, grind at an individual and make it harder for people to be able to push forth given a different circumstance. There's also just the ego strength that every individual has and the previous experiences. When we talk about moving forward in terms of trauma, the term that comes to mind is resilience. And if you think of a slinky that you just kind of bounce, resilience is our ability to bounce back from a difficult circumstance. So some individuals exemplify an enormous amount of resilience. They're able to bounce back. And when you look at the studies like in 9/11 and some of the firefighters and people that experienced that event, which was traumatic, what was it from those that bounced back, had that resilience, from those that didn't? Social support, being able to talk about it, the experience, and not be in isolation, and make meaning out of the circumstance, have a purpose in it. And so there's a lot of other things like mindfulness and a lot of other things that have been demonstrated in different other studies that have been found to help build that resilience. Now, when it comes to minorities, it's astounding that minorities, children, demonstrate an incredible amount of resilience. And there's some hypothesis around that. Some of it is around the idea that we have grit because we've experienced hardship. And so it's like you work the muscle of difficulty and you move forward. I definitely have seen that to be the case with many of the Latino families, particularly that I have worked with, that this is just the next thing. The pandemic was the next thing. They've already had one thing after another, and they just kind of, okay, well, I got let go of that job. I found another job. They just are used to it. And so it's amazing how many individuals have been able to push through. Now, others experiencing the same event, we know, are having a completely different story. That's why you see things like depression and anxiety and substance abuse and domestic, all skyrocketing in terms of the statistics that are out there. So there's two stories, right? There's an individual and there's the group of people that have incredible grit and resilience and are powering through. And then there's others that are just being pummeled down. And then, so giving that, we know that there's people that are suffering and there's people that are hurting. And so why not get help, right? This is the question of stigma that you mentioned. And there's just this idea that just has come through that getting help is a bad thing, or that mental health is just something so there's somehow we've separated the body, the soul, and the spirit into separate items of the individual instead of understanding that we're a whole. So while we can appreciate that someone has diabetes and we can say, go get insulin, or we can say, oh, you have heart problems, you need to get on a diet and you need to take, medication for your heart. Everybody accepts that physiological wellness. But there's still overwhelming stigma around mental health. And somehow that is looked at as something, it gets confused with spirituality. And obviously there is a spiritual context across the board. But somehow it's associated as a sin that's been developed over, and that needs to be confessed. There's all sorts of thoughts around it. Instead of us looking at it as, we are biological beings and we are mental beings, we're spiritual beings, and mental health is also a biological problem, not just a spiritual one. And so there is that discussion. Because there's so much stigma, that's why with Family Bridges or the Everyday Owl, these products that we've developed, we try to push through them through something that's more culturally accepted, which is education, and coaching, and those are entryways that we have found to bring awareness to some of these same issues. And once people start realizing that really what we're doing is coaching people and providing them with information and self-awareness, there's more insight, and then that leads to possibly seeking for help for those who do need it most.
Wow, that is incredible. And let me say this, you sound like you know what you're talking about. She has this just calmness about the way she articulates it. And there's this, you're talking, you're like, Doc, I'm going to be well. When I'm done with talking to her, whatever I'm facing is going to go away. Just
absolutely.
like
it makes her a great boss too.
I mean, could you, man? Does she ever get flustered? I mean, that's just good.
No, she's always on top of stuff.
I grew up with 6 girls, okay? There was a lot happening, and you just start studying your book.
You had to,
you just kind of keep going.
So with that, let's talk about this program, Everyday Owl. So I have two daughters. One of them is I think she just turned 20, I believe, September.
That's great.
And mental issues is a reality for a lot of these kids. When I was coming up, we just pressed through it, right? As a matter of fact, it was a huge stigma for us coming up, particularly in the minority community. So, but our children today, we're not sure whether they hear their friends talk about therapy, they wanted to, or they're really facing it. So as parents, we're really confused because we didn't grow up, in that reality.
Yeah.
So our daughter had to teach us as she began to on her own, obviously asked us, but seek out therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And we had because, she grew up 2 parents household in church, financially well off, all the things that you would not imagine. Yeah. And then we're Black on top of that. So I'm thinking, all these. So we have to learn and what that means and walk with her and not stigmatize her. And it's been great for us as a family. So but you that's the group that you're targeting with this Everyday Owl. So is the idea here dealing with these kind of situations for that population, or is it more to it than that?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for bringing that up and sharing your story. I do think there's so many of us as parents, we're doing the best we can. And there's a lot of protective factors, right? The kids are actively engaged. There's a mom and dad. And it's not necessarily the story of a single mom or right? We don't have that. And depression hits. The CDC prior to the pandemic indicated that the second leading cause of death in the United States was suicide for ages 10 to 34 or so. And it's just kind of, you're just trying to make sense of this, right? Like, what? That was not the case years ago. Exactly like you said. Like, what is going on that a 10-year-old is taking? I mean, and we've seen it now in the pandemic just spike up. Very concerning. I know of a school district that had to open an emergency because of the suicide. Just the problems that they were having due to the schools being closed. So just crazy, right? Like, what's going on with these young people? There's one documentary, if you haven't had a chance to see it in Netflix, called The Social Media Dilemma. And they propose that it's because of social media and identity being wrapped up in that age group. And as, kids' identities being, so there's all of that. That's definitely something that could possibly be a part of it. I think culturally, there's just so much nuanced now that facilitates that. And so I think as parents, we just need to be more aware. I think there's just more coming in at kids than when I grew up. It was just like, you just go play outside and then you come in and you eat dinner. And now there's just way more cyberbullying. I mean, there's just so much going on. That even as an adult, just try to make sense of this world. It's overwhelming and draining in itself. So never mind as a young person. And I think culturally, overwhelmingly, what I've seen with young people and how we're raising them is for them to be happy. So culturally, that's what we do. We put big parties for our kids, for them to have a big party. We cater to them. And so I think somehow we're we've learned as a society to bring up kids to be consumers and to take, and as parents they give. They hit the 18-year-old mark, and I'm speaking in very global terms. This is so individually nuanced that some of this can't really apply to, be straightforward for every individual. But for a young adult, all of a sudden they hit 18, maybe they're out of the home, and now people are not giving to them. They're not the center of stage as they were in their family or what have you. And reality hits in. And so there's just like this gloom and doom, like, oh, now I got to work and I got to, pay a bill, and adulting starts hitting. And that's a depressive state. Whereas before, you're just like the king of the world in your home. And now you're like, what? So there's some of that transition that I think it hits young adults hard. And so, yes, with the Everyday Owl, we want to recognize that mental health piece, help young people, adults, and understanding that young kids are traveling, if you will, through that adulthood, and the decisions that they're making could set them up for success or set them up for failure. And so this concept is being able to equip them with jobs, with engagement, resources, as well as tackle that relationship dynamic. That's pretty important. But I'm sure Bethany has more to add to this.
Bethany,
Yeah.
What you got?
Yeah, that said, and I would also add that I remember that when I was coming out of high school, I remember me and my friends sitting there saying, there's all this stuff they taught us in high school, and I don't know how to change my own tires. I do now.
Wow.
But, I don't, school, and you learn how to drive the car, but they don't teach you how to take care of the car, and they don't teach you how to finance the car. And then all of a sudden you have this thing in your lap that you need, and you don't know what to do with it. And you multiply that by all these other life skills, and all of a sudden adulthood becomes very overwhelming. This idea that you have to go out there and do it on your own is scary, and it's a big deal. And this generation coming up is self-identifying. Not they're experiencing symptoms, they're going, they're getting diagnosed as high anxiety. They recognize in themselves, I have high anxiety, and then that's getting confirmed later in a clinical setting. And I don't blame them for that, because it's getting harder and harder. And then you add the pandemic to that, and it's their goals and dreams, they feel like they were set back. That's part of what we want to do, is make them realize they haven't been set back, they've been redirected. You're going to have to you might have to find another way to achieve. You might even have to set your goals a little differently, but there's still ways to achieve. Fortunately, as humans, we've experienced can bounce back, but they need to know that they can bounce back, and that resiliency component again. But part of how you bounce back is you have the skills to do it. And so you're telling a generation that feels like, I don't have those skills. You can have them, and this is how you can have them. And I do feel like that resiliency component is important, and that feeling like adulthood is not out of their grasp is important.
Wow, that is good stuff. We're talking to Alicia La Hoz and Bethany Barrett. Alicia started this organization, Family Bridges, to come alongside families and help them deal with just life issues, from children all the way to adulthood. And this is just good stuff. So we're going to transition, because I want you guys to coach families a little bit. We have entrepreneurial family out there, and they have, like me, they have children. And I want, what tips can you give them? And then I also, one of the things we emphasize here is about this idea of job creation. I mean, Alicia, you created 15 plus jobs now. That's awesome. I want to talk about the future of Family Bridges and what does that look like, the economic impact for your success, both for families, for our community, for our city, for our cities, and for our nation. So and we're going to wrap up there. But let's go back a little bit. I want to deal with a political discussion a little bit. My daughter, she volunteered for an immigration attorney because she started to be a lawyer, and she part of her process of academic. And she shared with me about how traumatic Hispanics were, at least in that office that she was at, because of some of our government policies. I want to know from you guys, how real is that as you're dealing with these communities? How real does what government does or doesn't do impact? Because I'm assuming that you are also dealing with a lot of immigrants. So does that add to the trauma? Is that kind of just because immigrants have another type of resilience, even natural, than just local national. So have you seen any impact of government plus or minus in terms of as you dealt with these communities?
Yeah, so the immigration experience is traumatic in itself for several different factors. You leave your home community and you come into the dominant culture and language and your friendships and just so many dynamics in that. And depending on that experience across the way and how welcoming that process has been for you, it could be great as well as it could be very detrimental, right, and difficult. A lot of the families that have demonstrated extreme resilience is because they've chosen to adopt this personal agency attitude that they say, this situation is very difficult and it's very challenging, but I'm going to control today what I can control, right? And they focus on that. And there's all sorts of dynamics within that. Everything from working really hard to sending money overseas to their family, and figuring that pathway forward. But there is some conditions, right? There are certain communities that definitely they're probably instigated more by the political landscape, and that story is difficult in itself, and it's difficult to control. But then that story being played over and over again has that sense of re-traumatizing people, because then you're being exposed to it over and over again. And that story, which is one that if you don't have personal agency, what I've seen is it fuels a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. And then it feeds things like social phobia too, because people then want to just stay enclosed because they're even more scared. So sometimes that can be very toxic and very negative and not helpful either, right? Especially if something is a powerless circumstance. So there's a lot, I think, loaded with that context and what could happen. I think what we've seen that has helped are very basic things like what you just mentioned when you shared your story, that you said your daughter had to teach you. Well, you were open to listening to that feedback. So within our families, what has helped, what we teach is, let's listen to each other and learn from one another. And we're not going to understand our 18-year-old or a 17-year-old, 16-year-old. There's so many cultural differences generationally, as well as just with the worldviews that everybody's being exposed to, that we have to learn from one another and adopt that attitude of grace instead of that, I say so, and, these are the rules of the home and what have you, and also in the community as well. So I think that first piece is really important, adopting that in our home. Well, we can take that same attitude, whether it's government or these other issues as well with others, and adapt it to others where we learned from each other. So instead of just trying to say, this is the way, and this is the only point of view, and this is the right way, that closes the argument and leads to a lot of friction, lead to a lot of frustration, and then we just end up in the spiral of negativity and violence. But if we are open to listen and we're open to learning from others, then that lowers defenses and we're able to understand others' experiences. So a home adopting that learning and that growth mindset, as well as in the streets, in the community, whether that be with government officials or government policies, that can go a long way in terms of healing our families and healing our nation. We have this saying in Family Bridges in our leadership program that says, lead yourself first, and then you can lead others. So let's lead ourselves first in our homes, and then we can lead others. The second component is agency that we teach, is that personal agency. It's overwhelming if you turn on the TV and you start trying to making sense of this government and all these, the laws this way and the laws that way. But what we can control is spending 5 minutes a day with my son or daughter, right? Mm-hmm. I can control making a meal and going around the table and saying, hey, talk to me about your highs and talk to me about your lows. And those 10 minutes or that hour that I'm going to have, and I'm going to share a meal 3 times a week, that's going to make a significant impact in the well-being of that child. That's going to reduce that child will end up in risky behaviors because they were able to attach to you because you paid attention to them. So that's what I mean by agency, focusing on what you can do today to make a difference in the lives of those whom you love. And these micro habits that we establish, and these micro habits then lead to a very good impact down the hall. And the third is that growth mindset, being willing to learn and learn resilient skills like mindfulness, goal setting, problem solving, conflict resolution. These are all things we can learn. And when we learn them, then it increases our resilience, which then makes us be just stronger and be able to deal with the tough thing of the day. Because if the pandemic taught us something, is that we just don't know what other crazy thing is going to fall. So the world is crazy, but we can learn how to deal and how to bounce back from difficulty in a healthier way.
Wow. I think you answered my second question. I think this, our entrepreneurs who are there watching and listening. So in a sense, if I'm an entrepreneur, if you think about entrepreneur, there's no setting as crazy as an entrepreneur's life, right? The parents are hardly ever there because they're busy making the buck, right? Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of instability, right? Based upon what season they are in the business when the child is born or as they grow into children, right? It's a lot of, I was a child of an entrepreneur. And then now I'm an entrepreneur. And so I like that, that first lead yourself, right? So as an entrepreneur, I need to teach my children to lead themselves, own their own results. Then that agency mindset, I love that. In a sense, control what you can control, right?
Yeah.
And I may not be able to control the ups and downs of the business, the market dynamics, the political landscape, policies, macroeconomics. But what I can control is whether I take my child to work or not, whether I come home early, spend time, whether I leave late, all of that. And then it's going to growth. So with that, then if some of the entrepreneurs who are watching and listening, is there any other specific application you might want to share with them in terms of how they can walk with their families in a healthy way so that the business dynamic does not create unrepairable mental or emotional damages?
I think one of the things I've heard a lot with my conversations with peers that have been entrepreneurs is that we love to work. Come on, we like it. We like the game. And before we know it, like the 60 hours a day, it's 80 hours a week. And it's just, and now with the pandemic, we already know boundaries are blurry. And I think there's a question I made myself somewhere around, or early when I turned my 40s. I thought, if I keep running my life like this, what's going to happen 10 years from now? So other agents will start control your lifestyle if you don't take control over it, right? And so I had to say, why am I not scheduling time for myself? Like, why am I not like going for a run? Why am I not exercising? Why am I not doing things? Oh, well, because I'm too busy and I'm doing this. And it's like, no, that's a fallacy. So I feel like we get sucked into this like busyness world. And I mean, on paper, it's true. There's all these commitments. But if you really stop and think about it, if you plan it, you can make it happen. I mean, we know that. Like if you purposely make a choice and you say, I'm going to not take meetings at 7 a.m. I'm going to go and do some reflection time. And I am going at 2:00 take meetings while I'm going for a walk. And I am like, I'm going to schedule, once a month an outing with my family. And I am going, if you decide, you're going to make it happen, right? Words are prophetic that way. So I think my feedback is stop with the excuses and make it a priority to be with your family. We've learned in the pandemic, actually, that people have been spending more time with their family in the sense that they've been, forced to do it. I'd say keep it as a lifestyle, keep it going. Don't slide into this overworking thing, because Billy Graham and all these great authors that you think about have one thing in common. Warren Buffett and Billy Graham, in both of their memoirs, they both mention one thing. Very different people, right? Evangelist and the other one, an investor businessman. What did they say? One of the things that they regretted. What did they regret? Not spending more time with their family.
Wow.
And just let's make it happen. You just have to resist the urge to just be 100% your business. Those are great things. It's good to work for the business. It's good to make it happen. But at the end of the day, your family's there, and that's what you need to focus your attention to.
Oh, that's good advice. And guys, that's free of charge too. That's good stuff. I tell you. So, Bethany, I'm an entrepreneur and I have an owl. Is that am I saying it right? Is that supposed to be that designation of that group?
Everyday owl.
Everyday owl.
So I have some everyday owls in my house. What do you give me? What can I do with these owls to make sure that they don't end up crazy?
Well, part of it is, again, like Alicia said, you've got to take care of yourself before you can take care of your kids. I also think part of it is accepting that I had amazing parents. There were a couple habits I picked up from them that weren't so good, though. But they've accepted that when I made the choice not to engage in those habits, that wasn't me saying that they were bad parents. That was me saying, no one is perfect. I'm going to have habits that aren't the best, and that's not personal. And the other thing too is just to make sure that they're learning to give back. A big part of it, that when you do things for other people, all of a sudden, and you're not looking at yourself so much, and you're not worrying about yourself all the time, all of a sudden the world shifts perspective a little bit, and making sure that your owls, your young people, have multiple perspectives that they can look at, and multiple avenues, not just to express themselves, which they have 1,000 avenues to express themselves, right? This is the most individualized generation ever. There's 500 shades of pink you can pick from for your phone case. That's not the problem. But the problem is, who am I with regards to other people? And whether it's giving, getting in touch with the other generations in your family or giving back in the community, finding ways to get new perspectives by being engaged with other people and focusing on other people can really make a difference in the way you see the world. And by being able to see the world as a bigger place, all of a sudden you'll feel a little bit smaller, but that's not always a bad thing, because all of a sudden there's more to talk about, there's more to do, there's more to see, and it's not all about you, which is actually a good thing.
If there's time for one more tip, and that's just piggyback writing on what Bethany said and how important it is to raise our children to contribute. One thing that motivates, and when you think of depression being kind of a lack of energy, right? And you want to be able, it just kind of drains you, and you want to be able to just be motivated to do things and be able to reactivate your life. One of the very powerful things that motivates is volunteering. It's giving back. It's having a sense of purpose. And so are we training our kids to contribute, or are we training them to be happy?
Good.
And so there's nothing wrong necessarily with them having happy moments, but if our whole entire purpose for them is to be happy and we're not teaching them how to contribute, then they're going to feel really depressed when they don't have those things. And so one of the things that my husband and I are very intentional about is really encouraging our kids to contribite. The pandemic turned them into little entrepreneurs. They're selling origami Valentine's Day cards, and they have a goal of $200 a month. Their ROI is great. Paper, it's really cheap. But they started collecting all this money, and so we used it as a way to start teaching them about money. And we put it in there. Okay, you got to give 10% to charity and 10% to the church. And they're so little, they don't know. They're like, okay. And they're doing the math. They gave me $50 this month to give to a school in the Dominican Republic. They're now motivated. So I said, well, I'll match it up to X amount. And they're making origami like crazy and selling it to, all the moms in our neighborhood. So, there's little things that we can do to encourage that contribution.
Oh, that's some good stuff. Listen, this is just good. These late, I know now why you hired Bethany. She's smart. This is good stuff.
She's amazing. Yeah.
So we're gonna have the ladies give us the last word of advice. Before we do, I do want to tell you about their website. If you want to know more about their organization, how they can come alongside your agency, serve you or serve your community, go to FamilyBridges USA.org, FamilyBridgesUSA.org. You can learn about Family Bridges. And it's a great website, and there you can learn that there's strengthened bridge between people, husband, wives, children, parents, families with their communities. They empower people, equip leaders, encourage hope. Their mission is to promote thriving communities by delivering services to strengthen family relationship while embracing their culture and spiritual values. Their vision, they want strong families with purpose-driven children, leaders of their generation committed to their community. This is just good stuff. I mean, at a time where there's all kinds of uncertainty in the air, we need stabilizing forces like family bridges to remind us that all will be well. Also, if you want to learn, if you enjoy this podcast, I want you to share it. Okay? Share with your friends, with your family, share with others who may be dealing with trauma and they're looking for a resource, who may have an idea like Alicia did and may want to pursue it, wondering, should I do it or not? May never thought they would be entrepreneurs or social entrepreneurs. Maybe her story might inspire them. Or maybe you know other agencies that may need this kind of resource. Go ahead and share with them. Also, if you want to know how we can come alongside you and help you to become an entrepreneur, to build your kingdom business or enhance your existing business, visit our website, nehemiahecommunity.com. nehemiahecommunity.com. There you can learn about our training program, Biblical Entrepreneurship, Identity and Destiny, and other courses that can help you in your business. You can learn about our coaching program, about how to bring alongside you a coach that can help you grow your company, or our access to capital, where we can connect you to investors that can help you raise money for your business, or just join a community of entrepreneurs from around the world that are doing business with shared values. There are folks from Asia, Africa, Europe, Latin America, and we are working together to transform the world. Membership does have its privileges. So connect and be a part and join in. Well, before we let you go, one last advice. So I'm going to start with you, Bethany. So, what advice would you give? You know, you've had a journey of moving from one area of the world to another, or the nation to another, and you were to land a job with Family Bridges. So somebody's out there like you, COVID-19, they're facing all kinds of uncertainty and they want to land their dream opportunity. They want to find a place like Family Bridges. What advice would you give them as to how they are to navigate to find that, to land on that place? Oh, do we lose Bethany? All right, well, let me go to Alicia. Sorry, Bethany has had a
I hear there's snow up there.
no, that's probably why. All right. Wow. She looked like she was paying so close. So, Alicia, let me ask you. So, there are people watching and they're entrepreneurs and they admire your journey. You went from 9 to 5 to making an impact around the nation. What advice would you give them as they consider how they can make their life matter and count as you have yours?
Good question. I think surrounding yourself by good people. I feel like my training was clinical psychology, not business. Or a lawyer or all the other things that you have to learn when you're an entrepreneur or an accountant or anything like that. So just surrounding myself with advisory board members that could feed into that, and learning from others that are experts in that field. And so you don't have to do life alone, and you don't have to do social impact or your business alone. I have a coach. I meet with other CEOs of very diverse businesses, and they all offer an enriching experience, and it gives you an MBA, right, on the road, right, that you otherwise would not have. So surround yourself with good people that can help you in this journey, and it's just going to be more richer. You're going to learn from them and avoid mistakes too along the way. I think also one of the things that we have at Family Bridges that applies to the business world is we believe in empowering others. And so our leadership mindset is one of that servant leadership where we're going to empower others. And so instead of micromanaging or hovering over people, that can go a long way. We can do that at home. I can uplift and encourage my spouse, my children. What do you need for your $200 a month goal? Origami paper. Okay, let's get to origami paper. We can empower others at your business. What can you do to encourage others to be successful on that track? And so if you have that mindset, it means that your talent, your people are going to trust you, and they're going to even give more. Encourage. I think we need to do that at home, encourage each other. This is a very difficult time. It's easy for us to blame. It's easy for us to put ourselves, be critical, put ourselves down. But that discourages, and that, it's humiliating, and it just, ugh. But if we uplift, thank you so much for taking out the garbage today. Thank you for this cup of coffee. Thank you for helping me out. Wow, what a good job you did in this report. Wow, I'm really proud of you. And so when we uplift others, that motivates, and you want to do more of it. So let's adopt an attitude where we encourage others, and let's equip. So your team wants to learn, wants to work, but we need to invest in training. We need to invest in giving people the resources and the tools to do that. We need to equip our children to be successful. We need to equip our children to be leaders. What does it mean to train a child to be a leader in the future? So if we have that mindset at home, at work, we're going to go a long way.
Wow, good advice. I think Bethany is still frozen, but you know what though? Alicia, you knocked out of the park. We're going to have you come back. Thank you so much. James Archery says shalom. Well, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Bethany, again, thank you so much. Listen, let me pray for you, our audience, as we leave. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord enable you to steward those talents that are under your care, as Alicia has, whatever talents you may have. And may you do them in such a way that one day you can hear those wonderful words, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. Guess what? He'll make you rule over much. God bless you. Bethany, I'm so sorry that we missed you last. Thank you so much. Alicia, thank you so much. Guys, let's stay connected.
Love you. All right, absolutely.
All right, bye-bye.